Isn't it amazing how when something has been on your mind a lot and it's been resolved, just how quickly you can fill the space that it once occupied with a new thing to think about? Well, I'd spent 8 weeks thinking about getting my stuff back. Not because I'm materialistic or desperate for my clothes. I couldn't wear most of them as my pregnancy progressed anyway. It was all about the sentimental items that I had deep emotional attachments to. And it was how Mr. C had been using them to keep me under control and keep me in contact with him. I knew what he was doing, but I played the game. And I remember how much I kept thinking to myself, you've got to keep talking to him so you can get your stuff back. Just be polite, keep up the charade. Once you've got your stuff, you can go no contact. And it was only when I really got to a place of accepting that I wouldn't be getting all my things back that suddenly I was surrounded by them all. And I now know that that was the law of attraction working its magic, but at the time I wasn't really familiar with manifesting. And so once I had all of that stuff, I was presented with the opportunity to actually go no contact. And it's one thing knowing that you need to go no contact, it's another thing wanting to go no contact, but it's another thing altogether actually doing it. Because until that moment when you cut off all the contact, your body is still getting the hit from the addiction they had you trapped in. Each time the phone dings, it's a little shot of adrenaline, and each time you reply to the message, another dose of cortisol. And when he doesn't reply with insults or demands, but polite, kind, or apologetic messages, you get a puff of the all-too-addictive dopamine and oxytocin. That's the thing with the trauma bond. It isn't just learnt behaviour, it's an actual chemical addiction to a cocktail of chemicals, which is said to be more addictive than heroin. And even though I'd been using the grey rock method to communicate, going no contact is like going cold turkey, and you don't actually have to have given up heroin to know that that is an unpleasant, painful experience, and it takes an immense level of power and self-control. So with that space in my mind no longer consumed by the thoughts of my stuff, it quickly began to fill up with thoughts about him. The what ifs, the whys, the how had this happened? How had I not seen it all? Was it my fault? Was I the narcissist? It was all getting so overwhelming. And so I started to reach out to other survivors. They'd know what I needed to do. And I think deep down, I knew what I needed to do. I needed to go no contact, and I needed to do it now. I wanted to quit this addiction, and I wanted to be free of it, and I wanted to overcome it because I was done with him. And after the way he had behaved and the lies I'd uncovered since I left, there was no way I wanted to speak to this man ever again. And I wanted to protect my daughter from him too. But I didn't want to be stuck with him inside my head, controlling my thoughts and causing me to question my own sanity. This was the trauma bond at work. My body was craving the hit and trying to convince me whatever way it could to push me back towards him, just one more go on the roller coaster. But no, I wasn't doing it. So I did my research and I learned all about the trauma bond. I spoke to loads of other survivors about what to expect and what to do to help. And the advice was one of three things. Separate your energies using visualizations, journal about your feelings to release the trauma bond from your body, and distract yourself with something positive and for you. And having never had to give up an addiction to a relationship before, I trusted those who had already trod the path, and I did exactly what they said. I looked up cord cutting visualizations. I journaled and I wrote letters and I burnt them, and I wrote my own visualizations and I imagined the cords that connected us being severed. I didn't think of it as one big cord, more of a big thick rope made up of lots of little strands. You know, like a ship's rope that gets its strength from all of these smaller strands? Well, each of those strands was like a moment, a promise, a memory, a shared joke, or the chaos, the demands, the shouting, the lies. Each one had to be broken, and I knew I couldn't do it all in one go. So I started to meditate every night on this, and I began to change my mental picture of him to one of a shadow, merely an outline of a person that no longer had any of my light and was a dark container, empty and without any of the qualities that I had projected into him. And it felt good. After 2 or 3 days, I could feel myself starting to relax a little bit more. I took comfort from the fact that I would confine my thinking about him and the cord cutting to the evenings before I went to sleep, and I was confident that I could ignore any contact that came in because I knew what to expect. And on day 3 of no contact, I got my distraction. I had space in my mind and it needed to be filled with something for me. I was doing homeschool with my daughter for a couple of hours a day and my family were around to distract me, but I'd just had my first values elicitation session, so I was doing quite a bit of thinking about what it was that I wanted from life. I was still horrified about just how many women were in the same position as I was, after post after post after post arrived in those Facebook groups from survivors who were facing the same struggles or describing a life that was all too familiar to me. I was also acutely aware of how many others were still stuck inside these controlling and abusive relationships. And like I didn't know for a long time, they didn't realise what was going on and what was going to happen when they did realise. Where do they go? What do they do? How could I help them? I had a deep empathy for them and I really wanted to help. And in the middle of the night, 1 year ago today, it came to me, a flash of inspiration, seemingly out of nowhere. I had this idea, a big idea, a complex and an in-depth idea, and I had it all at once. I knew what I needed to do. I lay awake in bed and I mapped it all out in my head, and then I got up and I put it all down on paper. I would create an online course. It would summarise everything I had learned and inevitably would learn from my experience. I would research it, I would speak to survivors, I would try out every healing technique, modality and idea I could access, and then I would make notes about it, I would test it out, and I would put them into the course. I'd come up with a method to heal that would be easy to follow, and it would be free for everyone. I'd film the course and I'd make it available to every survivor of domestic abuse who wanted to do it. I needed a distraction, but more than that, I needed a purpose, a new life direction and a challenge, a way to turn my negative experience into a positive, and this was it. It was a flash of inspiration from I don't know who and I don't know where, but it felt so right, I just knew I couldn't ignore it. I had to explore it and I had to do it, and I knew I could do it. And since that moment, I've been working to make it happen every day. I committed to healing myself through healing others, and so far it's working. Thank you for joining me on this episode of 1 Year On, and if you would like to be notified of any more episodes, do turn on the notifications and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I hope you have a wonderful day, sending you lots of love. Bye bye.